And if these kids become adults and decide that, community is unnecessary or community hurts, then there will be a sadness. And this is mental health crisis.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to talk about the kind of kid that almost every parent kind of thinks that they want, but probably very few understand, and that's the easy kid. There's this idea circling around right now that the easy kid in the family, and this oftentimes happens, is the preferred kid or the kid that brings delight to every family. The one who doesn't cause problems, the one who doesn't ask for much, the one who always seems to be fine. But there's some new research that's coming out that's pointing to something that's really challenging for me and kind of striking. And that's that the child who's easy isn't always thriving. And sometimes that child has just learned that the safest way to be loved is to really need nothing at all. They learn to stay out of the way from some of the research that I'm seeing, and they also learn to not add any pressure. They learn to not bring their needs into a house that already feels full. And here's something that is really sobering. They learn that this pattern doesn't disappear. It follows them into adulthood, where they can kind of sit in a full room of tons of people who actually care about them and still feel incredibly lonely in a way that they can't explain, because they weren't taught how to express their need. They were really taught how to erase their need, or maybe even hide their need so that no one recognizes it, not even themselves. Dr. Kathy, when I think about this as a parent, I mean, there's some hard realities that really are uncomfortable, because you oftentimes want to have an easy parenting engagement with all of your kids. But what if the child that we kind of end up worrying the least about is actually the one that we're really missing out on, and they're missing out on our parenting? So I want to jump into this, Dr. Kathy, and it's a hard topic, but I think it's really important. And I want to start by asking you a little bit of, why do easy kids oftentimes get overlooked? How do parents make sure that the kid who is easy and who isn't really demanding our attention is still deeply loved and valued and feels that way?
So important. And I can see how this would challenge any parent who's listening. I wonder, Wayne, if some of the children want to be overlooked. Depending upon the culture in the home and how parents interact with and relate to the other children, they might be choosing to stay away. But perhaps they have a mean-spirited dad whose first words out of the mouth tend to be critical and demanding, and we get that. I don't want to shame anyone here, but that is a potential reality. Possibly the mom is busy with her own things and she's overwhelmed, and she's tired, and this child doesn't want to frustrate her and sees that the mom interacts with the other children maybe in a more of a judgmental, aggressive way. This is reality. We're not perfect parents. So that's the first thing I want to say is there a potential rhythm in the home that is causing this child to want to be easy because they don't want to relate, because they don't value the mom, the dad, or they see that the mom and dad are relating in ways that are actually somewhat scary and intimidating. Let's be willing to be humble and to think about that. I do love this idea, though, that parents need to look out for this happening, and then they need to walk toward the child. We so often want the kids to walk toward us. Let's walk toward the child, and let's learn to play checkers and enjoy it. I know of a mom who isn't musical in much of her life at all, but wanted her children to be pianists. Her husband was, and she saw the value of that. And she chose to walk toward her kids, and she chose to engage them with soundtracks of their favorite musicals and to sit with them on the piano bench as they were learning, their initial scales. And it was a beautiful thing. We can do that in so many ways. We walk toward the kids and we call them by name. One of the ways that we value is to call people by name. Our name is important to us. And so you don't say, hey, come here. You say, hey, Elizabeth, I'd love to talk to you for a minute. Using their name is a way that indicates value and, I want to know you. And Wayne, does it sound crazy if I would simply say that just let them know? Just sit next to this child and say, man, I've missed you today. Or, man, we haven't interacted much this week. I've been so busy with work. Or, the committee at church is really getting involved. The father daughter dance that's coming up and I've been so busy. I've missed you. Could we have a conversation? I think that would be a powerful way that we state to a kid, you matter to me.
Dr. Kathy, I think that there's a hard reality that for many kids, they get attention because they demand it, because they do
Yeah.
something that really requires mom and dad to kind of interact or engage them. And I think that for some kids, they learn that love is kind of sometimes tied to that. I want to ask you, for those kids then that really look at how maybe their siblings are behaving and say, I never want to be like that. I don't want to be like my sister where they're always making my mom mad. And so they actually like kind of stop engaging or maybe sharing some of their needs. I want to know a little bit of like diving into this a little bit deeper because you do so much work on identity and identity formation. What does that kind of teach kids when they start to learn to not express their needs and they
Mm.
start to see and kind of form their identity as something that I don't really actually have needs? What can parents do to kind of then step into that? So it's kind of a two-part question. What does it do to kids when they learn that behavior that they shouldn't express their needs? And then how do parents recognize that and kind of step in a healthy way?
That's so challenging. You know, we have needs. God created us with needs that only He can meet. So the first place I go, because of the teaching we do here at Celebrate Kids, which is about the core needs, if our children don't realize they have needs, they will walk away from God even, which is the larger tragedy, right? When they realize they have a need for trust, a need for security, and a need to be known, God is the one who does all of that best. God is our trust. God is our security. God is our ever present help in times of need. And He's the one who defines us, created in His image for His glory. We're chosen, we're adopted, we're complete in Christ, we're warriors and conquerors. These are things that are true. And if we allow our kids to think that they don't have needs, they may not walk toward God. They may not seek Him as the one who would answer the questions that they have. And of course, why do we have families? Because needs are met in family. Community is built in family. And we should be best known first by God, and then secondly by, the moms, dads, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, et cetera. The multi-generational biblical family is so key. So no, we've got to help kids know, no, the needs are good for you. The needs will drive your relationships. The needs will drive your purpose. The needs will cause you to become who God imagined you becoming when He chose to create you. So we make sure that we communicate that. And I think again, moms and dads need to be vulnerable and transparent and say, "Hey, man, I had a need today at work, and I vulnerably and carefully went to my boss and communicated, and everything changed so much for the better. I'm sad that I kept it to myself for 2 or 3 work days, and I didn't admit what I needed. I admitted it, and he was able to help, and everything's changed now." So do we do that? Do we let them know that a husband can meet the need of a wife and a wife can meet the need of a husband, and that this is what relationships are ideally all about? We got to talk about it. We got to model it.
Yeah. Why does this happen? Can we jump into that a little bit? Like, why do some parents kind of praise almost like with an engagement, maybe a little bit more like the more mature or kind of low maintenance kids? And why do those kids end up then feeling like disconnected later in life? That's what some of this research is kind of highlighting. Why is that? And I don't know, how do we raise kids who aren't just like easy? I think the goal, I mean, kids end up being easy because they end up living into a parent's kind of track that we're trying to,
Mhm.
encourage them down. And so there's a natural tendency that we think that things are connected and secure, but kids, later, what we're finding is that later on in life, they're not. So why does this happen? And how do we kind of maybe reinforce or connect with kids so that they don't feel,
Mhm.
disconnected later in life?
Yeah, it's really important. I think it may happen because, again, the kids want to be distant for a variety of reasons. It may happen because parents are overwhelmed. Can we just go there? Today's parents, like, I have such respect for those of you doing it well. You're busy with your own stuff. The culture is chaotic. There are concerns. Many of our listeners, Wayne, are of that sandwiched generation where they are both raising children and helping aging adults navigate the rest of their lives well. So I think there's a fatigue in a lot of our parents today. There's an overwhelmedness, if I can say it that way. And I think it might just be very comforting for a parent to get home from work or the kids to get home from an activity and realize that at least one of them was able to get ready for bed without a lot of drama. And so we appreciate that. I can only imagine that there's true blessing in that. But it is dangerous because we're knowing from the research developmental years matter. Childhood does affect adulthood. Today does cause tomorrow to be a particular way and to have a particular rhythm. And if our kids are able to walk through their childhood without deep connections, if they're feeling that they are independently capable on their own to navigate the things of life, they may continue to live that out. And then they are lonely, even in a crowd, and they isolate, and they will not become the whole of who they could have been, because iron sharpens iron. We are designed to relate, and we're designed to live in community. And if these kids become adults and decide that, community is unnecessary or community hurts, then there will be a sadness. And this is mental health crisis, coming along. We see that in the research, of course, as well. I think they potentially, again, won't develop into the wholeness that God would have designed for them. That's what's on my mind. I hope that's helpful.
As Dr. Kathy and I talked today, it reminded me of something that I read a while ago in Genesis chapter 16. I'll begin reading at verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road of Shur. And he said to Hagar, "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress," Sarai answered. I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." And the angel added, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." I'm going to jump to verse 13 now, because this is how she finishes this interaction with the angel of the Lord. Hagar later gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me," for she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." Hagar and this whole story is really unique and interesting in light of the whole history of the world, but also in light of what's going on here with Abraham and Sarah. Hagar is this Egyptian servant, and essentially she's socially invisible inside of the house of Abraham and Sarah after she becomes pregnant. She had no power, she had no voice, she had no standing, and really when the conflict erupts, she's sent away. And she's sent away as a pregnant woman. She's sent away alone and unseen, and she ended up walking into the wilderness, really almost in many ways in that culture, prepared to die. Servants in this culture, especially women, were really valued only for their utility, not for their personhood. But in the middle of all of this, God meets her, and he gives her a name. And in that meeting, she gives God a name. And the name is El Roi, which is the God who sees me. Not the God who uses me or the God who tolerates me or the God who just is there, kind of letting things happen and affirms me. It's this God who actually sees her. I think this speaks directly to those kids who might be the quote-unquote easy child. Kids who don't demand attention can really become emotionally invisible, almost like what happens to Hagar. So as parents, we can't just respond to the noise. Sometimes we need to pursue those, especially those that are quiet. We need to ask questions that go beyond, "Are you okay?" And we need to listen longer. We need to let our kid know that we see them, not just for what they do, but because their identity is being formed and that they're loved. And we can affirm that and let them know that they are really seen, not only by us, but also by God. And I think directing them to that and maybe stepping in and being, in a way, their security in those moments where they feel unseen can help them see that there is a God who's bigger and is a lot more secure in security, that can really be the person that they trust and rely on, and really ultimately then build their identity in. I hope that's an encouragement for you, and I hope this whole podcast and all that we do here at Celebrate Kids is an encouragement for you. I'm so glad you joined us today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.